We all know that we have to tread lightly around tree huggers and other over-enthusiastic greeners. They think that if you're not as green as they are, then you're part of the problem. I think I'm green enough, don't you? Growing up on a farm, it was a dairy farm, we raised our own feed and did a cash crop of wheat. Maybe we weren't perfect, but I watched the loam climb our fencing each year. We used woven wire fencing around all our fields, so it's easy to see whether the good earth was growing with nutrients. If I had to do a fence repair, quite often I would have to dig as many as 3 squares down to reach the bottom of the fence. That's how much the land had grown. I feel that I'm strong on not being green, that's too limiting, but being a good steward of our planet, treading lightly and making sure there's room enough for all the creatures to have a place of their own. I do track what is going on in the realm of green, and we do have a hybrid car and a Ford F-250 pickup. We use about 2 tanks of gas a year with the truck, so we don't overdo it. But when we look at what green really means, the numbers don't add up for the typical tree hugger view of the world. I think this is worth a good talk about. Hello anyone, I'm Scott Bain. They call me the old farmer. I don't think the numbers for green add up. So why do we have a hybrid car? That's simple. If gas gets too expensive, we can get to town and back in the winter and all the way up to the Harbor Freight Store in Owasso, Michigan and back on one charge in the summer. If need be, we don't need any gas for most trips. That's why we have a hybrid car. For years, the green people have been spouting great things about green energy. Granted, there are certain steps we can take, especially reducing energy usage by doing the many things around the homestead that stops bad air leaks in buildings, as just one example. But don't do a perfect sealing of your house. People have died using cellophane and wrapping the entire house and then suffocating inside due to the lack of oxygen. There needs to be some airflow throughout the home. Just use common sense and you can do a good job without doing stupid. Plan ways we can do 2 jobs instead of just one with a unit of energy. As one example is cook pasta on the stove and at the same time steam vegetables in a steamer above the pasta. That's using a unit of energy twice. This does take planning, but after a while, it becomes second nature. But most folks think of electric cars and solar panels and windmills as good solutions to green energy. If you really want to reduce your carbon footprint, drive a gasoline-powered car. That's right. You will reduce the total footprint with carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases, as well as the use of energy making the electrical vehicle. The real energy hog is in the mining and purification of lithium and cobalt, and purifying silicon for solar cells. The better of the 3 major sources for green energy is windmills. They are only better, not perfect. Also, keep in mind that with the issue of fertilizers, we don't have enough to grow all the food we need for the population of the world. 2 billion people are not going to have food to eat. It's called famine. One immediate solution is increase the carbon dioxide in the air. It's fertilizer, plain and simple. There are many gases and vapors that are considered greenhouse gases. Even water vapor is a greenhouse gas. So let's work on reducing some of the greenhouse gases that are better at trapping heat than carbon dioxide, such as nitrous oxide, hydrofluorocarbons, perfluorocarbons, sulfur hexafluoride, and nitrogen trifluoride. Let's not forget that responsible scientists have been continually saying this could cause an ice age because engines of the weather and water dispersion can change the blending of various weather climates. One example is the shutting down of the Gulf Stream, which would cool down Europe and keep the snow on the ground to a lower latitude and for longer times, which would cool down the planet. The computer programs are not accurate, and we just don't know what will happen. So be wary of anyone claiming absolute knowledge. All they are doing is enhancing global warming with their own yapping. It kind of reminds me of the patent medicine shysters of the late 1800s. Or even sadder, they are incompetent and don't know what they're talking about. Okay, it's time to put some numbers on the screen. I will be putting up a lot of information in graphs and charts. You might want to do a screen grab so that you can look at the information later on. I'm just going to scroll through the table and charts so that you can take a look at things. Granted, by volume, carbon dioxide is the largest volume of greenhouse gas. But there are many other gases that trap heat to a greater degree, and more than just several can be reduced by capturing before becoming part of the atmosphere. Carbon dioxide is naturally found because of life, this being the reason it's the major contributor. Many of the graphs and visual presentations came from Wikipedia, and I have a link below. Much of the minerals used in green technologies come from China, and they are still using coal-fired plants in many areas of this industry. The environmental pollution is tremendous and will cause environmental issues in China for at least several decades, if not centuries. The one thing that is putting the brakes on electric cars, solar cells, and wind generating facilities is that the mining of the needed materials is not even close to what is needed just for the United States, let alone the world.
Professor Simon Michaud, let's listen in to what he has to say. Well, let me put in my earpiece so I can hear too. Listen in to what he has to say about what it would take to move to the first generation alternative/clean energy to get away from fossil fuels. Here's what he says.
Then it all is summed together. So everything we need is summed together per metal, and that gives us this column here. Total metal required to produce one generation of technology units to phase out fossil fuels. And so that we've got these numbers here. The next column is global metal production as it was from mining in 2019. So this is all from the USGS and the BGR. The final column is how many years of production at the 2019 rate would be needed to hit the actual volumes needed.
Oh, hold on, just 3 columns. This isn't that hard. This is the kind of math that's always missing from the conversation. So let's go over it a little bit more carefully because Professor Michaud is making a really important point. I'm so glad he did this work. This is the kind of work you have to have what I would call an informed conversation, to have the appropriate level of context. This isn't even that hard, but we should be having this conversation because so much hinges on us being able to move to a clean energy future. So let's look at this again. One more time. Let me get my drawing tool out here because you know how I like to do that from time to time. So this is how much would be required in this column right here. So that's 4,575,000,000 and change tons of copper. That would be for all the copper motors, all the copper windings. What he's done in this study, he's asked the question, how many solar panels, how many wind towers, how many electric cars? There's a whole mix of things we would need to move away from fossil fuels. That's the goal, right? That's what we've been told we have to do. And that's what the WEF seems to be serious about. That's what the ESG standards are about. Pretty serious, moving us away from that stuff. That's what many governments in the West are actively trying to maneuver us away from. Fine, but we have to understand what's required. So this is his best guess right here. This analysis could be off by a little bit, probably off by some, one way or the other, but it's a good starting point for the conversation.
Commercial batteries are not even close to the storage capacity that we need to run most green technology. Some lab experiments hold strong promise if the lab results can be accomplished commercially. and at affordable prices. To be perfectly honest, it will take mining on the moon and on the asteroids before we can get all the needed minerals that we need to, at the very least, double some of the production. And in some cases, some of the minerals we will have to increase by 100-fold or more. An honest conversation about green technologies will only happen when we start producing many of the manufacturing steps in space where pollution is not an issue. We just are not there as of this video. Close, yes, but still a decade or two away from the first steps of space manufacturing. As for generating the needed energy to run all the vehicles and future green technologies, we will need to start using thorium nuclear power plants, which appear to be safer than the current nuclear power plants. Until fusion reactors are built that actually produce more energy than it uses, we will have to stay with thorium reactors because these first fusion steps are still using more energy than it produces. This will change later on, but for now we need to look at building thorium reactor plants and work our treaties so that only thorium reactors can be used around the world. Unless we can figure out zero-point energy where claims are that we could reach the stars with unlimited energy, I guess we're stuck with what we have, which is very limiting for some efforts. As for green energy, in some parts of the world it works, but it's still not commercially viable for many other locations where there's not enough sunlight or wind. As for electric cars, I think they're a great idea, but I hate to say Tesla is building them wrong. Nikola Tesla must be rolling in his grave because of the way Tesla is making electric cars. I just wish that Mr. Musk would rethink how he's building these cars. We could have longer travel distances, lighter cars that are less expensive, and fewer batteries. Not to come down hard on Mr. Musk, none of the automobile manufacturers are building electric cars the way they should. And such details are too much for this presentation. After writing the script, but before reading it, I see that Domino Pizza decided to start changing out their fleet of delivery vehicles with electric cars. If their reasoning is the same as mine, dual fuel source, it's a good idea. If Domino Pizza is going electric to be green, it's a dumb idea. Domino Pizza is a Michigan-based business started in Ann Arbor, Michigan, home of the Blue and Corn, the University of Michigan. The pizza back then were much different than they are today. These days, Mrs. Old Farmer and I either go to a mom and pop place for pizza or make them ourselves. I haven't found a chain pizza that I like, but this is about green energy, not pizza. For now, until the technology catches up with the demand, green must be considered the same way that we perceive perfection in oneself, an unachievable goal which we strive for, but we will never succeed. At least with green technology, I believe it's a goal that is still worth striving to reach. I think we can, someday. Or if you really want to go true green right now, get a horse. Their fuel is green grass and hay, along with a little bit of oats and corn. Good solid green technology. Before we go, it's important to quickly mention for all who are visiting to subscribe, ring the bell, leave a comment, and share with friends and family. Now for the most important part, thank you to those who have subscribed. Thank you. And yes, thank you to those who are visiting. We value you too. We're trying to reach 1,000 subscribers so that we may receive a pittance from YouTube to cover expenses. We replaced one camera, tripod, and bought a water-cooled editor for video production, plus all the tools we review. So if you could help us reach that 1,000 subscription point, thank you. Well, This is the old farmer, Scott Bain. Be well, be safe, and be kind to someone.
Don't forget to click like and click subscribe on the Old Farmer YouTube channel. And thanks again for watching. Bye.
The VFW National Home for Children, providing families of veterans and active duty military opportunities for growth and development in a nurturing community. Please consider a donation to help their children and families. I.C. Rhodes speaking.